have with monks and nuns and samaneras and samaneris all together in Anagaricus, about 90 people in robes, one of the most successful monasteries in the West. And he will speak about disrobing, because many of the rest of us around these monks have been monks before, or nuns.
Your Holiness. Well, first of all, I would like to make it clear that, of course, monasticism is not for everybody, nor should it be for everybody, but there should exist the institution of monasticism for that small group of individuals who are drawn to the ideal of a total dedication to the Dharma through renunciation and purity. This is mostly taken, I have to admit, about the Western Tibetan Sangha, and does not refer to the Chithurst community. Okay, as we all know, modern society is based mainly on greed and believes that happiness mainly depends on acquisition and the satisfaction of our desires. As we all know, sex and violence rage everywhere nowadays. And the monastic Sangha is a group of people whose lives are based on purity, renunciation, restraint, and discipline, on reducing our wants and desires, which goes completely against the stream of the world. So dharmas and centers, however, are not immune to the idea that more is beautiful. Traditionally, Sangha's role of preserving traditionally, in the East, the Sangha had the role of preserving and transmitting the Dharma, so that people supported the Dharma, and they respected the Sangha, and they loved the Sangha, and were very proud of their Sangha in the East. However, in the West, this is not the same situation, partly because in modern times, the scholars and the meditation teachers who transmit the Dharma are mainly laity. And therefore, however, because the laity now are also transmitting the Dharma, this does not mean that therefore the Sangha is useless for the modern world. Because the Sangha preserve a way of life based on the Dharma principles. They're a living example that restraint and simplicity bring happiness and peace. They remind us that one can live with no sex, no family, few possessions, no security, and yet be perfectly happy and content. The Sangha, of course, should have the time to devote themselves to study and practice without the material problems of earning a living or the emotional entanglements in too close personal relationships. The Sangha has a freedom which is often not available to those who have to live a lay life, both a physical freedom and an emotional freedom. However, unfortunately, modern attitudes which stem from our Protestant and materialistic backgrounds, even Western Buddhists have a strong feeling of superiority to the role of the family, close relationships, success in their lives, in their careers, which, after all these are mostly based on our desires and attachments. But still they are projected, even among Western Buddhists, as being desirable things, and a way of practicing the Dharma, which is true, but in a way a superior way of practicing the Dharma. So therefore, Sangha, and when I say Sangha here, I mean, of course, monastic Sangha. I don't keep repeating monastic Sangha. You understand what I mean? So therefore, Sangha are seen as escapists, as neurotics, as parasites, as people unable to face up to the challenge of intimate relationships, and so on. We all know about this, huh? And renunciation is disparaged and misunderstood. It's considered somehow slightly perverse, or, you know, it's because you can't make it in the world, therefore you renounce it because the world has renounced you. But a true monastic lives without any security, dependent on the unsolicited generosity of others. This is not being a parasite. This is going forth in faith. After all, Jesus said, "Give ye no thought unto the morrow what ye shall eat and what ye shall wear." And that's, in a way, what being a member of the Sangha is all about, that you are not concerned with your physical existence overmuch, that you have faith that the Dharma will provide for you enough for your needs if you, from your part, are practicing in all sincerity. There's that faith that you're never going to starve, that you will be supported, not always materially, but in every way. However, in Dharma circles in the West, the Sanghas live in a kind of limbo. Yes, we'll come to that. They are neither supported by the laity, nor, in fact, by the lamas themselves. Even when some support from centers where they work is forthcoming, nonetheless they are still in many ways second-class citizens. They are given not very good places to stay and treated as inferior to paying guests who have lots of money and can support the centers. The Sangha is always shoved in the background. Really. They're given very little personal attention. There's very little respect or appreciation for having, in fact, devoted their whole lives to the Dharma. Centers are mainly geared towards lay people, and the Sangha are shunted to one side and considered unimportant. Or else they're overworked running centers with often very little training or experience. So therefore, the stress of maintaining high standards is very difficult because people expect them to be very high with very little training. And, I mean, they are only imperfect human beings. They also need some sympathy and appreciation. But they very rarely get it, actually. Also, I mean, monastics, they lose out on the pleasures of the family life, the worldly life. And at the same time, they have very few of the joys of a true monastic life. This is for the Tibetan Sangha. I'm not speaking about Theravadan Sangha. Because they are not living in a community, usually. They're by themselves. They can't do the things which the lay people can do, but also they are not living a monastic life either. So they're in a kind of monastic bardo. It's a Sangha bardo. And some of them feel very lonely also. They feel that they are unable to integrate the idea of non-attachment, with friendships and seeing other people as lovable, as developing affection, because then they feel that that is becoming too involved again and that's not suitable for a monastic person. They don't know how to get the balance, and therefore their practice becomes quite sterile and they feel alienated from people around them. And also they often feel that the robe itself alienates them from other people, that people act towards them artificially and that they cannot have any close relationships. And as they're usually not living in a Sangha community where they could have relationships, they're very lonely. It's a very hard life for many of these Sangha in centers, you know. And also some feel very uncomfortable wearing robes in the street and when they're going around, because people stare and say, oh, Hare Krishna, and you know, they always feel very conspicuous and on show. And they feel, as I say, that the wearing the robe does create this separation from ordinary people, so that they cannot even help people as effectively. Then they get very little support from the lamas, you know. I mean, Your Holiness, this is true. I mean, for one thing, lay people are not Western lay people. Western lay supporters are not even encouraged to esteem the Sangha, or at least not the Western Sangha. Unlike in traditional Asian societies where the lay people naturally esteem and support the Sangha, in the West this is not so. They're not, the lamas never mention this as part of their Dharma practice. And so the lay people think, well, who are they? You know, and there's no sympathy or appreciation of what they are trying to do. And, for example, although the lamas take very much care of their own Sangha, Tibetan Sangha, you know, they build monasteries, they train the monks, they really care when they ordain them, they're put into the monasteries, there's this whole support system. For the Western Sangha, this is non-existent. The lamas ordain, and then you're just thrown out on the world with no training, no background, no encouragement, no support, no guidance, nothing. Get on with it. This is very hard. And I am surprised that so many of the Western monastic Sangha stay for so long. I'm not surprised that they disrobe. They start with so much enthusiasm, so much pure faith and devotion, and gradually it just goes down and down as they get so discouraged, so disillusioned, and there is no one who helps them. This is really true, Your Holiness. It's a very hard situation. And it has never happened in the history of Buddhism before. I mean, always the Sangha was firmly established and cared for and nurtured. And in the West, this is not true. And I don't know why. I truly don't know why. Anyway, there are, of course, a few monastic centers, such as the Theravadin centers and Nalanda Monastery, which are doing very, very well. But for the nuns, what is there? There is simply nothing, frankly. However, to end on a higher note, I make a prayer that that this life of purity and renunciation, which is so rare and precious in this world, that this jewel of the Sangha may not simply be thrown down into the mud of our indifference and contempt.
Makes me tear.
Ninja, yes.
叫早经济。早经济。Thank you.
Someone is saying that you were quite outrageous.